You ever notice how some things stick in your memory like glue? A random detail that makes no sense at the time but later hits you like a train? For me, it was a red hoodie. Jessica bought it last fall. Nothing fancy, just a plain hoodie she picked up on sale. It wasn't really her style, too casual, too bright. She was more of a blazer and boots type. But she wore that hoodie all the time. Around the house, out for errands, even on date nights when she'd normally make a big deal about looking polished. I remember teasing her about it. What's the deal? You hiding from the paparazzi? She'd laugh it off. It's comfy. You know, I don't care about looking fancy. I believed her. Until the day I found out the hoodie wasn't hers. Started with a random Tuesday morning. I woke up late, groggy, and stumbled into the kitchen. Jessica was already gone. She'd left early for a supposed gym session before work. There was an odd stillness in the house, the kind you notice when you're alone for too long. I grabbed my coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling through my phone mindlessly. That's when I noticed the hoodie draped over the back of the chair. It wasn't unusual to see it lying around, but something felt off. I couldn't explain it. I picked it up without thinking, and that's when I saw it. A smell. Not her perfume. Not the laundry detergent we always used. It smelled like someone else. I pressed my nose into the fabric, my heart pounding. It was musky, masculine, like cologne mixed with sweat. I froze, gripping the hoodie like it might shatter in my hands. My mind was racing. Why would her hoodie smell like that? I told myself to calm down. Maybe she borrowed it at the gym? Maybe someone else wore it by mistake? But deep down, I already knew the truth. I pulled the hoodie over my head, letting it hang loose on my frame. My hands slipped into the pockets, and that's when I felt it. A receipt. Crumpled. Forgotten. I unfolded it carefully. One word stood out. Motel. The receipt was from a cheap motel just outside of town. Dated 2 days ago. Paid in cash. I stood there in the kitchen, hoodie on, holding that receipt like a bomb that had just gone off. Jessica didn't know I had it. She was still out, probably thinking everything was fine. But I wasn't fine. Not anymore. I wasn't the kind of man to jump to conclusions. But I wasn't a fool either. Something was wrong. I had proof now, concrete evidence that the woman I shared my life with was hiding something. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I sat there in the kitchen, still holding the crumpled motel receipt like it was going to start talking if I stared long enough. Didn't. Instead, my brain started filling in the gaps, and every little thing that hadn't made sense before suddenly clicked. The late-night gym sessions, the team dinners, the way Jessica's phone had become an extension of her hand, and that damn red hoodie. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search for the motel address. A 2-star dump on the edge of town. Not exactly where people go for a relaxing getaway. More like where you go to do things you don't want anyone to know about. My hands shook as I typed the name into Google Maps. I zoomed in, scanned the street view, and then noticed something. A diner, right across the street from the motel. An idea hit me like lightning. I grabbed my jacket and keys, shoving the receipt into my pocket. I was done sitting around. The diner was the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease. A neon sign buzzed faintly in the window, flickering between open and N. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, barely looked up as I walked in. I took a seat at the counter, glancing out the window toward the motel across the street. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Jessica walking out hand in hand with some mystery guy. A big sign that said cheater checks in here. But I didn't see anything. Just the motel, quiet and unassuming, like it hadn't just turned my life upside down. The waitress wandered over. Coffee? I nodded. Sure. Hey, you work here every day? She poured the coffee slowly, eyeing me with mild suspicion. Most days. Why? I leaned in, lowering my voice. You ever see a woman around here? About this tall, brown hair, usually wearing a red hoodie? She frowned, thinking. Maybe. We get a lot of folks coming through. Why, you looking for someone? I forced a smile. Yeah. My wife. She said she was meeting a friend here the other day, but I can't remember which day it was. The waitress snorted. Honey, if your wife's meeting friends around here, I got bad news for you. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I already know. I just need proof. Something solid. Something undeniable. I pulled out the motel receipt and slid it across the counter. Her eyes flicked down to it, then back up to me. Her expression softened just a bit. "This your wife's?" I nodded. She sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but..." She glanced toward the window, then leaned in closer. "I've seen her, and she wasn't alone." I felt my stomach drop. "You're sure?" She nodded. "She's been here a couple times. Always with the same guy. Tall, dark hair. Drives a black truck." The blood in my veins turned ice cold. "I know that truck. It was parked outside our house just last week. Jessica said it belonged to a coworker who needed help moving furniture. She said he was just a friend." I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. The waitress watched me carefully. "You okay, hon?" I wasn't, but I forced myself to nod. "Yeah, thanks." As I walked out of the diner, I could feel the hoodie's fabric brushing against my skin, like it was mocking me. Jessica wasn't at the gym. She wasn't out with friends. She was meeting him. And now I had a name. As I drove back home, my mind was locked on one name: Derek, the guy with the black truck. Her so-called coworker. I had met him once. Jessica introduced us during a barbecue at our house. She was laughing too hard at his jokes that night, and I remember feeling something ugly twist in my chest. But I shook it off. She called me paranoid when I brought it up later. "Jesus, Matt, you're overreacting. He's just a friend from work." I let it go, like an idiot. Now, with that receipt in my pocket and the waitress's words echoing in my head, I was done letting things go. I pulled into our driveway just as Jessica's car rolled in behind me. Perfect timing. She stepped out, looking all polished in her workout clothes, hair tied up, makeup flawless. Not a single bead of sweat on her, though. Funny, right? I stayed in the car for a moment, watching her through the rearview mirror. She grabbed her gym bag, slung it over her shoulder, and gave me a bright, practiced smile. "Hey, babe," she called out. "You're home early." I got out of the car, shoving my hands in my pockets to keep from clenching them into fists. "Yeah. Had a slow day at work." She walked up to me, kissed my cheek. It was automatic, rehearsed like muscle memory. I didn't feel a damn thing. "You okay?" "You look tired," she said, tilting her head. "Rough day?" I smiled back, just as fake. "You could say that." We walked inside, and she headed straight to the kitchen, humming to herself as she unpacked her gym bag. I stood in the doorway, watching her carefully. "So," I started, keeping my voice casual, "you didn't mention you were meeting Derek again." Her hands froze, just for a second. If I hadn't been watching, I would have missed it. "Derek?" She glanced over her shoulder, raising an eyebrow. "Why would I be meeting Derek?" I pulled out the motel receipt and placed it on the counter between us. Her eyes locked on it like it was a live grenade. "What's this?" she asked, her voice suddenly too calm. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the counter. "That's from the motel you've been sneaking off to. With him." Her eyes flicked up to mine, and for a second, I saw panic. But then it was gone, replaced with something cold and calculating. She crossed her arms, her lips curving into a smirk. "Wow, you've been spying on me now? That's a new low, Matt." "Spying?" I laughed bitterly. "You seriously want to play the victim right now?" She shrugged, picking up the receipt and twirling it between her fingers. "So what if I've been meeting him? It's none of your business." My jaw tightened. "None of my business? You're my wife." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. It's not like I owe you a detailed schedule of my day. I'm allowed to have friends." "Friends?" I slammed my hand down on the counter, making her jump. "Friends don't meet at motels, Jessica." Her smirk faded, replaced by something nastier. "You're right. We're not friends." She leaned in, her eyes locking onto mine. "We're more than that." That did it. I felt like my chest was about to explode. My hands curled into fists, shaking with rage. "How long?" I demanded. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. 6 months. The words hit me like a truck. 6 months. Half a year of sneaking around, lying to my face, and laughing at me behind my back. "Why?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why him?" Jessica shrugged, like it was the easiest question in the world. "Because he's exciting. Because he makes me feel alive." I stared at her, stunned. "And I don't?" She laughed. A short, bitter sound. Matt, you haven't made me feel anything in years. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake or a one-time fling. This was who she was now, cold, selfish, and completely unapologetic. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. This wasn't over. The moment she said, "You haven't made me feel anything in years," something inside me cracked. I stood there, fists clenched, staring at the woman I thought I knew. There was no remorse in her eyes, no guilt, just defiance. She wasn't sorry. Hell, she wasn't even trying to deny it anymore. And that's when I realized something else. Jessica wasn't scared. She thought she had all the power. She thought I'd yell, maybe break something, and then crawl back into my place as the obedient husband who'd put up with anything. Not this time. I walked around the counter slowly, watching her like a predator stalking prey. She stood her ground, crossing her arms, daring me to make a scene. "You're not even going to apologize?" I asked, my voice low, measured. Jessica rolled her eyes. Apologize for what? For wanting more out of life? For not settling for this? She gestured around the kitchen like it was some prison cell. "I'm tired of being stuck, Matt. You don't get it. You never did." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, absorbing them. Then I took a step closer, closing the distance between us. "You think you're stuck?" I said quietly. "You think you deserve better?" She met my gaze, chin lifted defiantly. "Yes, and I'm not going to apologize for that." I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold, calculated. Jessica's confidence wavered for a split second. "What's so funny?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Funny how you think you're the only one in control." Her eyes flicked to the phone, a hint of uncertainty creeping in. "What are you doing?" "Oh, nothing." I tapped the screen, scrolling through my recent messages. Then I held it up so she could see. "Remember when you said I never pay attention? Turns out I've been paying attention more than you think." Jessica's face paled as she stared at the screen. "Recognize this number?" I asked. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I stepped closer, my voice calm but deadly. "It's Derek's number. Funny story. I texted him yesterday. Told him I found the receipt. Told him I know everything." Jessica's eyes widened in shock. "You what?" "Oh, and he responded." I smiled wider. "Want to hear what he said?" I played the audio message loud enough for both of us to hear. "Matt, man, look, I'm sorry. I didn't know she was still with you. She told me you were separated. If I'd known, I never would've." I paused the message, enjoying the way Jessica's face crumpled. "Separated?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "That's the story you gave him?" She took a step back, shaking her head. I cut her off. "So, let me get this straight. You've been sneaking around with him for 6 months, and the whole time you've been feeding him lies, too? Telling him you're done with me? That we're separated?" Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was scrambling, trying to regain control. But it was too late. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, pulling out the hoodie. I tossed it on the counter between us. "This is not yours. It's his. Found it in our house. Funny how he left a little souvenir." "Huh?" She stared at the hoodie like it might burst into flames. "Matt, listen, no." My voice was firm. "You don't get to talk your way out of this. Not this time." Jessica took a deep breath, switching tactics. Her expression softened, and she tried to take a step toward me. "Look, I messed up," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "We've both been unhappy. We can fix this. We can go to counseling." I laughed, cutting her off. "Counseling? You think that's going to fix 6 months of lies? 6 months of you sneaking around with Derek?" Her face twisted in frustration. "It was a mistake, Matt. People make mistakes." I shook my head, stepping back toward the door. "You didn't make a mistake, Jessica. You made a choice." Repeatedly, I reached for my jacket, pulling it on slowly. "Where are you going?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. I glanced back at her, my expression colder than ever. "Don't wait up." Before she could say another word, I walked out the door. And as I stood outside, breathing in the cold night air, one thought burned in my mind. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. That I sat in my car for a long time after leaving the house, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was still pounding in my chest, not from sadness. That part of me was long gone, but from rage. Jessica thought she was smart, thought she could play me for a fool, juggle her lies and walk away unscathed. But now it was my turn. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to Derek's messages. His apology still sat there, unread since I played the audio for Jessica. I hit the call button, letting it ring. He picked up on the second ring. "Matt?" His voice was hesitant, confused. "Yeah, it's me," I said. "We need to talk. In person." There was silence on the line. Then a sigh. "Look, man, I already told you. I didn't know. She said you guys were done. If I'd known, I know." My voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm not here to fight with you. I just want you to hear the whole story. Face to face." Another pause. I could almost hear him weighing his options. "Okay," he finally said. "Where?" "That diner across from the motel." 30 minutes. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. Just the tired waitress wiping down tables and a couple of truckers at the back booth. I took a seat at the counter, the same spot I sat in earlier that day, and waited. Derek walked in 5 minutes later, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. He looked exactly how I remembered him from the barbecue. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it had seen better days. But now, there was no cocky grin on his face. Just guilt. He approached slowly, hands shoved in his pockets. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, taking the seat next to mine. I nodded, signaling the waitress for 2 coffees. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension thick between us. So Derek started, clearing his throat. "I guess you know everything now." "Almost everything," I said, staring into my coffee. "I know you've been seeing my wife for 6 months. I know she told you we were separated." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. "She did. I swear, man, if I'd known she was lying." "Why did you believe her?" I interrupted, finally looking him in the eye. He blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean? Why did you believe her story? What made you think she was done with me?" Derek hesitated. Then he sighed. "Because she never mentioned you. Not once. No pictures of you on her phone, no stories about her husband. It was like you didn't exist." That hit harder than I expected. "She said she was tired of being with someone who didn't make her happy," he continued. "Said she needed to feel alive again." I let out a bitter laugh. "Feel alive? Huh?" He nodded slowly. "I guess I was part of that for her." I leaned back, staring out the window toward the motel across the street. The pieces were falling into place, and a plan was forming in my mind. "Do you love her?" I asked, my voice steady. Derek looked surprised. "What? Do you love her?" I repeated. He looked down at his coffee, frowning. "I don't know. I thought I did. But now, I'm not so sure." I nodded, tapping my fingers on the counter. "You're not the only one she's been seeing," I said quietly. Derek's head snapped up. "What? You heard me." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You're not the only one. There's someone else. You're just part of her little game." His face twisted in disbelief. "No, she wouldn't. She would." I cut him off. "And she did." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a second motel receipt. "Recognize the date?" I asked, sliding it across the counter. Derek's eyes scanned the receipt, and his expression darkened. "That's the same day she told me she was at a work event." I nodded. "She wasn't with you that night," I said. "And she wasn't at work either." He clenched his jaw, the realization sinking in. "Who was she with?" I shrugged. "That's the question, isn't it?" Derek sat back, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus Christ." We sat in silence for a few moments, the air between us heavy with anger and betrayal. Then I spoke again. "You want revenge?" Derek looked at me surprised. "Revenge?" I smiled coldly. "Think about it. She played us both. She's been lying to both of us, making fools out of us. Don't you want to make her feel what we're feeling right now?" Derek's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "What are you suggesting?" I leaned in, my voice low and dangerous. "We're going to turn the tables on her. Together." For the first time that night, Derek smiled. "I'm listening." The plan came together faster than I expected. Derek and I sat in that diner for over an hour, piecing it all out. He had anger in his eyes now, the kind that simmers beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. I recognized it because I felt the same thing. But anger alone wasn't enough. We needed precision. We needed to hit her where it would hurt most. Jessica thought she was in control. She thought she could juggle her lies, keep her little secret life hidden. But what she didn't know was that the two men she played were now working together, and we were about to destroy her carefully crafted game. The first step? Timing. Jessica was predictable when it came to her routines. Gym in the mornings, work dinners twice a week, and girls' nights on Fridays. The same Fridays where Derek had noticed her going missing for hours, always with vague excuses. We picked this Friday for the trap. She'll think it's business as usual, I told Derek. But this time we'll both be waiting. The day of, I acted like nothing was wrong. I kissed Jessica goodbye in the morning, just like always. She was in a good mood, humming to herself as she packed her gym bag. Dinner tonight? I asked casually, sipping my coffee. She shook her head. Sorry, babe. Girls' night. I'll be home late. I smiled. No problem. Have fun. She smiled back. The same practiced, fake smile that had fooled me for months. But not anymore. That evening, I parked my car a block away from the motel and waited. Derek was already there, standing near the entrance. His black truck was parked discreetly around the corner. He looked calm on the outside, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. You sure about this? He asked as I walked up. I nodded. She deserves it. We didn't have to wait long. Right on schedule, Jessica's car pulled into the lot. My heart pounded as I watched her step out, wearing that same damn red hoodie. She glanced around, then walked toward one of the rooms, phone in hand. Derek and I exchanged a look. Let's go, I said. We followed her quietly, staying out of sight until she reached the door. She knocked twice, looking impatient. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Not me. Not Derek. Someone else entirely. Tall, older, maybe in his late 40s. He looked rough around the edges, someone you'd picture spending a lot of time in bars. He kissed Jessica on the cheek like it was routine, like they'd done this 100 times before. Derek sucked in a breath beside me. Who the hell is that? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Jessica and the mystery man disappeared inside the room, closing the door behind them. I glanced at Derek. Ready? He nodded. We walked up to the door. I knocked twice the same way Jessica had. There was a pause. Then the door creaked open, and Jessica's face appeared in the gap. The second she saw us, her eyes went wide. Matt, what are you? She didn't even get to finish the sentence. Derek shoved the door open, pushing past her into the room. The mystery man jumped up from the bed, looking startled. Who the hell are you? He barked. Derek pointed a finger at him. I could ask you the same thing, asshole. Jessica stepped between them, her voice shrill. Wait. Everyone calm down. I closed the door behind me, locking it with a soft click. No, I said quietly. We're not calming down. We're talking. Her face twisted in panic. Matt, this isn't what it looks like. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because it looks like you've been screwing two guys behind my back. Turns out it was three. The mystery man stepped forward, glaring at Jessica. Wait, what the hell is he talking about? You said you weren't married. Jessica's eyes darted between us, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I shut up, Derek snapped. We're done listening to your bullshit. Jessica's mask was slipping fast. The fake charm, the calm demeanor, all of it was crumbling. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. I laughed bitterly. No? How was it supposed to happen, Jess? You keep juggling all your lies until one of us gets tired and leaves? Was that the plan? She didn't answer. The mystery man shook his head, looking disgusted. You said you were single. You said I was the only one. Jessica turned to him, desperation in her eyes. Mike, please no. He grabbed his jacket from the chair, shaking his head. I'm out. And just like that, he walked out the door, leaving Jessica standing there, looking utterly defeated. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Derek spoke. Now what? I stepped closer to Jessica, meeting her gaze head-on. Now, I said slowly, you get to live with this. You get to live with the fact that everyone knows who you really are. Her eyes filled with tears. Matt, please. I cut her off with a glare. No, you don't get to cry. You don't get to beg. You made your choices. Now you live with them. I turned to Derek. You done here? He nodded. Yeah. I'm done. We left her standing there in that motel room, alone. And as I walked out into the night, I felt lighter. This wasn't just revenge. This was freedom. By the time I got home that night, the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't the calm, familiar quiet I used to cherish after a long day. The silence was cold, heavy, the kind that sits in your chest like a weight. I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I dropped my keys on the counter, sat at the kitchen table and just sat there, waiting for the fallout, for her. It wasn't long before I heard the front door creak open. Jessica walked in slowly, the sound of her heels clicking against the floor. She saw me immediately, sitting in the dark, and froze. You're here, she whispered. I didn't move, didn't say a word, just stared at her. She took a few cautious steps toward me, her face a mess of smudged makeup and tear-streaked cheeks. She looked nothing like the composed, polished woman I married. And for the first time in months, she didn't try to fake it. Matt, her voice cracked. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. So, how was your night? She winced, rubbing her arms nervously. I can explain. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Explain what? That you've been screwing around with Derek? Or that there's a third guy? What's next, Jess? Should I expect more surprises? Her lip trembled, but she kept her ground. It wasn't like that. I was lost, okay? I didn't know who I was anymore. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. Bullshit. She flinched, her eyes wide. You weren't lost, I said, standing up slowly. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every lie, every excuse. You planned it all. So don't stand there and act like you're some victim of circumstance. She bit her lip, looking down. I never meant to hurt you, but you did. The silence hung between us again, suffocating. I could see her scrambling to find something, anything, that would make me forgive her. But she wasn't ready for what I said next. Derek's done with you, I said quietly. And so is the other guy. Mike, right? Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. What? Yeah, I continued. Mike left, walked right out of that motel room. Didn't even look back. Jessica blinked rapidly, like she couldn't process what I was saying. He left? They both did, I said, stepping closer. Funny how that works. When the lies fall apart, everyone runs. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time, I wasn't moved by them. You did this to yourself, Jess. She shook her head, stumbling over her words. No, I can fix this. We can fix this. We can go back to how things were. I cut her off with a harsh laugh. Go back? To what? To you sneaking off to motels while I sit here like a fool? No, we're not going back. She dropped to her knees, sobbing now. I love you, Matt. I swear. I made mistakes, but I love you. I stood over her, watching the woman I once adored reduced to this broken, desperate mess. You don't love me, I said quietly. You love control. You love attention. And when I stopped giving you enough, you went looking for it somewhere else. She shook her head frantically, crawling toward me on her knees. No, please, don't do this. We can fix it. Please. I stepped back, out of her reach. You're only sorry because you got caught, I said. If I hadn't found that receipt, you'd still be lying to my face. Still sneaking around. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. This wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I walked to the living room and grabbed the envelope I had prepared earlier. What's that? She asked, her voice trembling. I tossed it on the floor in front of her. Divorce papers. Jessica stared at the envelope like it was a snake ready to bite. No, you don't mean that. We can fix this. Don't throw everything away over one mistake. I clenched my jaw, the rage simmering just beneath the surface. One mistake, I repeated. Jess, this wasn't one mistake. This was 6 months of betrayal. 6 months of you making me a goddamn cuckold while you lived your double life. Her face crumpled. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. But I was already walking toward the door. You made your choice, I said over my shoulder. Now I'm making mine. I didn't slam the door behind me. I closed it gently, letting the finality sink in. And as I walked away from the house, from her, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The divorce papers were just the beginning. Jessica thought the worst was over when I walked out that night. She thought I'd cool off, maybe disappear quietly like a defeated husband. But she didn't realize one thing. I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. This was about making sure she felt it. The same way I had felt every lie, every betrayal, every sleepless night wondering what the hell was going on. She wanted excitement. She wanted chaos. I was about to give her exactly that. The first move was the house. We bought it together 5 years ago, back when we were happy, back when I thought we were building something real. But the house was in my name. Something Jessica conveniently forgot when she started sneaking around. While she was busy trying to patch things up with Derek, he told me she called him begging to meet. I made a few calls. By the time Jessica got home one afternoon, there was a for sale sign on the front lawn. I'll never forget the look on her face when she saw it. She stormed inside, slamming the door. Matt, what the hell is this? I was sitting on the couch, sipping a beer, waiting for her. Oh, that? I said, pointing to the sign. It's exactly what it looks like. The house is going on the market next week. She froze, her eyes darting around. You can't do that. This is our house. I shrugged. No, Jess, this is my house. You just lived here. Her face twisted in anger. Where am I supposed to go? Not my problem, I said calmly. You can always check into that motel you like so much. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had nothing to say. Next, I hit her reputation. Jessica prided herself on her job. She worked as a project manager at a well-known marketing firm and loved playing the part of the polished professional. Her coworkers admired her. Her boss trusted her. But none of them knew what she was really like. So I decided to change that. I sent an anonymous email to her company's HR department, attaching screenshots of her motel receipts and a detailed timeline of her 6-month affair. I made sure to highlight how often she was sneaking off during work hours to meet Derek and Mike. I kept it professional, respectful. But the message was clear. Your employee is not who she claims to be. Jessica called me 2 days later, her voice frantic. Matt, what the hell did you do? I played dumb. What are you talking about? I got called into HR today. They showed me emails with motel receipts. They're putting me on leave while they investigate. I smiled to myself. That sucks. She let out a frustrated scream. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to ruin my life? I stayed calm. I'm not ruining anything, Jess. I'm just making sure people see the real you. You're crazy, she hissed. This is insane. You need to stop. Or what? I shot back. You gonna lie to someone else? Tell them I'm a monster while you play the victim? Face it, Jess, your game is over. The final move? Derek. After everything, I wasn't sure how he'd take it. But when I called him, he agreed to meet. We sat in the same diner again, both of us calmer this time. So what now? Derek asked, stirring his coffee. I'm done, I said. I've done what I needed to do. He nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. She called me, after you left. She begged me to meet her. I raised an eyebrow. Did you? He shook his head. No, I'm not that guy anymore. I smirked. Good, because she's not worth it. Jessica tried to fight back, of course. She sent me texts, emails, even showed up at my office once, pleading for another chance. But I never replied, never opened the door. And eventually she stopped trying. Her job? Gone. Her reputation? Ruined. Her life? Exactly where she left it, at rock bottom. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that she moved out of town. No job, no house, no friends left to support her. As for me, I moved on. But every now and then, when I see a red hoodie or pass by that motel, I smile to myself. Because I know she'll remember what I did for the rest of her life. Revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about making sure she never forgets.